All right, we're back with another Pickled Dragon Unscripted. Last time I didn't quite finish off all the questions I wanted to get to, so we're going to wrap those up today. But as always, I like to start off with a little bit of show and tell. Part of the question last week that we left off with was utilizing modules in your homebrew games and how much modification is too much or not enough, etc. So, but I wanted to share the adventure that I'm modifying for my piracy campaign. Um, and that was, as mentioned before, the Isle of Dread. It actually has a couple different covers. Um, both of them have your monsters there. But in any case, the reason I love this adventure so much is because it is one huge sandbox. The island itself, it comes with a map that the coastline is all explored and the little tiny islets all surrounding it. Or I don't think they're islets, but they're islands, tiny islands that surround the big island are mapped out, but the center of the island remains a mystery, and the party is able to go start exploring and 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 it's all hexed off. So as they explore, they can fill in. The players get their own little copy of the map, and they can do the exploration themselves. And of course, there's a DM's copy of the map. Um, so it is one huge sandbox with obviously stories. They hit a hex where there's something to happen, or something happens, or there's all kinds of random encounters. So it's just ripe for modification. And what's great is that Goodman Games has been reprinting all the old adventures in 5e, modified for 5e. Now, inside of here, you're going to find the adventure in its original state. But then on the interior, you're going to have all of the additions that Goodman Games added. So in my case, the pirates have been trying to assemble all this different pieces of this treasure map, and they've finally done it. They've assembled the map, but there are all these competing pirates, and they're all fighting to try to reclaim the map or keep the map. And of course, the map leads them to the Isle of Dread, where the ultimate prize awaits. So, in my case, one of the questions here was, if you have a custom world, how do you get modules to fit in it? How much prep should you do in the front end? And how much customization is the threshold before the adventure wasn't useful in the first place? Now, as far as prep goes, you're going to want to have, like for my game, for example, I know that there are a handful of things that I absolutely want to have happen. So I'll have written them out with some degree of not too much detail, but some degree of detail. And then I'll have a separate sheet where I just kind of have bullet points. Now, as you're playing the game, the bullet points are just kind of reminders. You don't want to have this long narrative that you've written out that you've got to go back and halt the game and read your notes. And if you don't get your, when you hit the bullet point you want to do and you don't get it exactly right, that's fine, because you don't want to stop your game and stop the flow to read your notes. So, you're going to want to prep, you're going to want to study up a little bit, but at the same time, it doesn't have to be perfect. The players are never going to know whether, you were supposed to go left when you went right or whatever, as long as they have fun, So, in terms of how much alteration goes, if the Isle of Dread, if you modified it to be, a peninsula of dread, it doesn't really matter. I mean, if you're inspired to take an adventure and it inspires you to then extrapolate on it and change it and change it and change it, that's fine. It doesn't matter, because the point is that you took something, you made it your own, and your players had fun, and you had fun doing it. So most DMs are DMs because they enjoy world building, they enjoy creating in that way and being creative. And I'm no different. I love to get my claws into something and make it my own. So that's why I love sandbox adventures so much, because yeah, I can use a lot of the elements from this adventure, and I plan to, but it's just open. The world is open for me to add anything that I want. And here's the example of that map I was telling you about. It's got the coastline is explored. The rest is up to the adventurers and the DM to fill in. Of course, the DM's map is completely filled, but you can change that at will. So, and that leads into our next question. And that is, I'd be interested to hear about your first experiences as a new DM and your experiences as a veteran DM working with new players. So my first experiences as a DM, I remember distinctly, because they were tragically, woefully terrible. But it's funny, because when I talk to my players, they don't remember it that way. A lot of times they're just happy to have someone to DM for them. I remember fumbling over words. I remember trying to read the box text and being misreading this and misreading that. I remember them destroying my just derailing what I had planned in a heartbeat, which players are always do. It doesn't matter how experienced of a DM you are. What the experience does is it gives you the breadth of knowledge to adapt and adjust on the fly. So yeah, my first experience, and I'm trying to remember what adventure I ran the first time. And I think my very first adventure was Dwellers of the Forbidden City. Dwellers of the Forbidden City, I think. Which happens to be another very sandboxy adventure. It's got a ruined city. Players can explore it. Probably a bad choice as a first adventure, because if for a first adventure, you probably want something a little bit more linear. But yeah, we later went on to, I adapted it into a homebrew of mine later on, and it was one of my favorite experiences as a DM. So this kind of went full circle. But yeah, it was a disaster, and but the thing is the players didn't think so. So you know, so it doesn't really matter. People, and that's my best advice to someone who wants to start DMing is sit down, read an adventure. I know, you know, Wizards of the Coast releases all kinds of first level adventures, the Lost Mines or whatever it's called, um, and just do it. I mean, if you sit down and you just start doing it, it's like anything else, whether it's writing or DMing or getting started is the absolute hardest thing. But once you've turned that first page, um, it becomes a lot easier. Trust me. So in terms of playing with new players, I tend to throw the rules out the window a little bit. I will streamline the rules to a vast degree. If I'm playing with children, that means no spell slots. If I'm playing with little kids, they can cast all the spells they want. They can use all the maneuvers they want. They can do, whatever they want to do with their character. I let them just do it. And but I also let them know that right now we're playing the game to have some fun, and as they get used to what a D8 looks like and what a D4 looks like, and what their D20 means and what they roll and what they add and that sort of thing. Once they get used to that, let them know. Then we're going to introduce more rules and build from there. But when I start my kids when they are 4 and 5, and you know, just let them have fun and go to town. Now, if it's an adult, I'll typically do some pre-gens, um, but if a player really wants to make their own character, which is fine, we'll sit down. We'll talk about, well, what do you want to make? What sorts of things do you want your character to be able to do? And they usually reference movies, which is great. That's a great starting place. And from there, they'll you just start building a character, and always start out first level. Don't layer on extra abilities or extra anything with a new player, unless you can. I mean, if you can absolutely avoid it, but sometimes new players come in the midst of a campaign, and that makes it a little harder. But you know, another thing I'll do is if I've got a more experienced player, I always buddy them up with the new player so that they can kind of ask questions and work through their characters. Um, Generally, in my tables, I don't allow coaching. So if it's someone else's turn, it's in combat, um, you know, it's that person's turn. They need to pick. Well, a new player, you can't do that. You know, I don't know I don't know if other tables do that, but the no coaching rule. But I always feel like players oftentimes can get kind of railroaded into decisions, and I want them, unless they ask, they can ask, but I want them to try to make as much as possible their own decisions and steer their character the way they want to steer them. So when it comes to a new player, um, yeah, I would definitely start them at first level if at all possible. Walk them through the character creation process. What is a good stat? What isn't a good stat? What do all the modifiers mean? What do the skills mean? Um, but you know, most of it they're not going to retain. So the best teacher, in my experience, is just to let them play and let them make mistakes. Let them ask lots and lots of questions, but give them a buddy to partner with, and you know, um, and let them have fun. Whenever possible, especially if it's kids. Rules got to go out the window when it's kids. So the next question was, how do you personally better prepare yourself for each session until you develop the confidence and skill to improvise with your players' decisions? And this goes into the very first question where I said, I would write up some narratives of what I wanted, a few sentences, but then I would create bullet points. So I would never ever have to go back and read through more detailed notes. I always had bullet points that helped steer me through the adventure. But your players are always going to throw you for loops, and there's, in terms of building the confidence to improvise. Honestly, early on, when these things would happen, I drew from movies constantly, Conan and Krull and all like the little side things, the never-ending story, all these little side stories that are always going on in all of these movies. I would just pull out of my head and go with it. And sometimes the players were like, "Hey, that's from Conan" or whatever, and that's fine, But it's at least something to get your hooks into. Or if you read a lot, there's oftentimes like the Elric series. There's lots of stuff going on in those books that you could draw on, and until you have that confidence, or more importantly, the knowledge of the game system and the game worlds to be able to say, well, this is a very good spot to throw in a Hydra, or this is a very good spot. One of the things that a lot of times your players will do is that they'll try to guess at your plot. They're going to try to guess at who your villain is. They're going to try to determine all these things in advance, and sometimes their ideas are better than yours. And so you also have to be prepared to scrap what you're doing, because you might say, that is even more perfect than what I had planned, and just give it to the players. So if they suddenly suspect a cabal of witches or hags of being behind these mysterious disappearances. Well, if that's better than what you had planned, if your imagination suddenly kicks into overdrive and you could see how that would all unravel, and then go with it. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to improvise like that. So his question continues. What are some of the ways you worked on improving your storytelling ability outside of play? Again, books and movies. Because there's plenty of times where you could be reading something or watching something, and you could see how that would fit into a game. But more importantly, you could see how that little hook translates into 3 and 4 and 5 hooks down the road, which are completely unlike what you started with, your original inspiration. And maybe you start with hook 3, and it was just that movie or that line in the book that got you, started on that line of reasoning that inspired you to create something new. So, and then a lot of times what I do, I write a lot. So, um, as you just sit and you think about the things that you're writing about, uh, it's very possible that you could be writing about a character history for a different game or a personal game, or just writing for fun, and then if something strikes you and it tells you, and it pushes a storyline in your game. It could be any number of things. So just being creative in general, I think, is a great way to just prepare yourself. How do you personally engage new players and encourage them to build their own story? And I think I touched on that. I think letting them make their own decisions. Don't let players walk on them. More experienced players will have, whether well-intentioned or not, sometimes they're just strong personalities. Sometimes they just think the new player needs help. But, give them the opportunity to make a decision. And if they want to ask a question, if they want to ask for help, that's fine. But otherwise, let them make their decisions and try to set up rules at your table that say, if it's this person's turn, let them take their turn. So so for example, in my table, if someone wants to ask a question of Jeff, and Jeff is 2 or 3 initiative counts lower than them, maybe they delay their turn. They reset their turn, they ask the question, and then they can go. So that way you can keep it in game if they want to role play. What do I do? So yeah, I think that kind of hits the nail on the head there, as far as well, I hope it does for you guys. For me, in my mind, I see it unraveling that way. But so I'm going to try to do more sharing at the beginning of the videos going forward. I really love the Goodman Game series. There's a few others out there, and I think there's a 4th one coming out soon. But the adventure, I want to remind you guys all that my new adventure, Prison of Kos, is out now, available in paperback on Amazon and PDF on DriveThruRPG. I'm going to prep the files necessary. Amazon has different specifications for uploading than DriveThruRPG for paperback, but I'm going to get DriveThruRPG uploaded with a paperback eventually as well. The Evil Under Chlorhaven, that one is also in paperback now, or in PDF, I'm sorry, on DriveThruRPG, and paperback on Amazon as always. And I'll also be uploading the paperback for Evil Under Chlorhaven. I'm going to plan on doing some videos where we'll just do adventure walkthroughs for some of these adventures. I've got the Days of Blight series. I've got those 2 I just mentioned, a few others that as a DM, I'll maybe call them DM walkthroughs or something to that effect. We'll upload those videos in the future. So, yeah. So, in any case, happy gaming, everyone, and as always, be heroic. Oh, and Happy 4th of July. Hope you enjoy your cookouts and your brats and your burgers and your independence. Take care.